Just this week, I put up a poll for you guys to decide the topic of this very video. Nearly 5,000 channel subscribers took part in the vote, and Eddie Guerrero and WCW came up as the winner. Thanks to everyone who voted, and keep an eye out for future opportunities to vote on video topics. While he already had a ton of experience from wrestling in Mexico and Japan, Eddie Guerrero got his first taste of worldwide recognition while working in WCW. Eddie was already a remarkable wrestler when he made his way to World Championship Wrestling in 1995. Being raised in the famous Guerrero family meant that professional wrestling was in the man's blood. Gory Guerrero, a pioneer in Mexican lucha libre, had 6 children, 2 girls and 4 boys, and all the boys would end up wrestling. There was Chavo Sr., the eldest of the sons, Mondo Guerrero, the second eldest, who worked around the California area and also had a stint in the AWA. Hector Guerrero had quite the career too, working for Jim Crockett Promotions during the 80s and having a stint in WCW throughout 96 and 97. He also portrayed the gobbledygooker in the WWF, but the less said about that, the better. And then there was Eddie Guerrero, the youngest of the brothers, and the one who would have the most success. You can tell here that Eddie's upbringing would have been all about wrestling, day and night, nothing but wrestling. Chavo Sr. had a son, also named Chavo, who was just 3 years younger than his uncle Eddie. Gory would allow Chavo Jr. and Eddie to wrestle during intermissions at the shows that he promoted. Now, we won't be looking at Eddie's time in Mexico and AAA, New Japan or ECW, any of that stuff in this video. This one is all about WCW, but Eddie actually had some matches in WCW long before 1995. In May of 1989, Eddie had a televised match against Terry Funk, a match that he lost. The following year, Eddie worked the dark match at Wrestle War 1991, winning in a tag team match where he tagged up with Ultraman, a luchador who still wrestles to this very day. After these brief matches in WCW, Eddie continued to work in Mexico and in New Japan Pro Wrestling. It wasn't until Eddie made his way to ECW though that Eric Bischoff took notice. Eddie was working some incredible matches with Dean Malenko, and along with Malenko and Chris Benoit, Eric signed Eddie Guerrero to a WCW contract in 1995. Paul Heyman argues that Eric Bischoff stole these wrestlers, but hey, you can't blame guys for wanting to make money. Eddie's first WCW match happened on the 30th of August at a WCW Saturday night taping. He lost to Dean Malenko, but just 1 week later, at WCW Main Event, Eddie defeated Jushin Thunder Liger. Eddie made his WCW Nitro debut on the 5th episode, defeating Dean Malenko on the 2nd of October in 95. Eddie had worked the Nitro Dark match just 2 weeks prior though. Throughout October and into early November, Eddie mainly worked against Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko, winning more than what he lost. On November 6th, Eddie got a shot at Johnny B. Bad's TV title on an episode of Nitro, a match that went to a time limit draw and is actually a surprisingly good match. You'd think that the styles would clash here, but I enjoyed this one and totally forgot that it happened. The crowd are totally into it also. Eddie made his WCW pay-per-view debut in November of 1995, competing in the first ever World War Battle Royal, a match that was won by Macho Man Randy Savage. Eddie's second pay-per-view appearance was at Starrcade 95. This pay-per-view featured a WCW vs New Japan best out of 7 tournament, and while Eddie didn't secure the point for his team, it's telling here that Eddie was chosen to represent WCW so early into his run. Just a week previous to Starrcade, Eddie Guerrero worked against Ric Flair on Monday Nitro. Going into 1996, Eddie started the year off with more matches against Chris Benoit, and also Eddie began a feud with Conan over the United States title. In March, Conan defeated Eddie in a near 20-minute show stealer at Uncensored 1996. This one here isn't talked about as much as other Guerrero WCW matches, but it still comes recommended. A slow starter, but the match is exciting when things pick up. It isn't surprising though that we have erased this one from our memories, as WCW Uncensored 96 also features the Tower of Doom match. Eddie Guerrero found himself in another big match at Slamboree in 1996 when he teamed up with Arn Anderson to take on Randy Savage and Ric Flair. Okay, so try to follow this. This event featured the Lord of the Ring tournament, a tournament where wrestlers were randomly paired in lethal lottery tag team matches. The winners of the lethal lottery tag matches would then enter a battle royal. The winner of the battle royal would receive a WCW world title shot. Convoluted and unnecessary as it was, Slamboree 1996 isn't a bad show at all, with the only problem being that the matches were a bit short. Anyway, Double A and Eddie were defeated on this night, as Flair and Anderson seemed to take more interest in beating up Randy Savage throughout the match. Arn and Rick also beat up Eddie Guerrero, so yeah. Eddie got a US heavyweight title shot against Nature Boy Ric Flair at Hog Wild in 1996. This pay-per-view is infamous for a few reasons. One of these reasons being that Bobby Heenan got smashed as he just didn't care to be at a motorcycle rally in Sturgis. By the time Eddie and Rick locked horns, Heenan is pretty much gone. While Bobby Heenan always did favour the heels, and of course he favoured the Nature Boy due to their relationship in the WWF, Heenan here is remarkably negative towards Eddie throughout the match, constantly reminding the audience that Eddie Guerrero will not defeat Ric Flair. I know it was his job to be the heel announcer around this time in his career, but go back and watch it for yourself and you will notice that Heenan just isn't letting up as Schiavone and Dusty Rhodes do all they can to put Eddie over. When Heenan slurs out that Ric Flair is mentally sharper than Eddie Guerrero, Dusty Rhodes just busts out laughing at the irony of his comment. But anyway, the match was good, and it also highlighted that Ric Flair really could make younger guys look like $1 million when he really wanted to. Flair won the match with his figure 4 leg lock. 1996 ended on a good note for Eddie Guerrero. The United States Championship was vacated when Ric Flair suffered a shoulder injury. In the weeks leading up to Starrcade 96, a tournament was held to crown a new United States champion. The final match featured Eddie Guerrero taking on Diamond Dallas Page, and Eddie Guerrero won the match. This one was a hard fought bout, solidifying that WCW's best matches weren't found in the main event spots. After the match though, the NWO was there to give Eddie a beating. Most people remember Eddie Guerrero's time as Cruiserweight Champion in WCW, but his United States title run, which only lasted 3 months, was still quite remarkable. At Clash of the Champions 34, Eddie successfully defended the belt against Scott Norton. Just 4 days later at NWO Sold Out, Eddie defeated Six in a ladder match, which was very fun to watch and stands out as one of Guerrero's best WCW matches. Eddie then had television defences against Jeff Jarrett and Chris Benoit before successfully defending the title once again at Super Brawl 7 against Chris Jericho. Eddie also put his title up against Ultimo Dragon on Nitro before losing the belt to old rival Dean Malenko at Uncensored 1997. I'm going to stop recommending matches right now because honestly, there are way too many good Eddie Guerrero WCW matches that need to be seen, and at this rate, I'd be naming them all. But yes, if you haven't seen Malenko vs Guerrero from Uncensored 97, put it in your to-do list for today. July of 1997 would be an interesting month for Eddie. On the 7th of July episode of Nitro, Eddie and nephew Chavo had a match against Vicious and Delicious. During the match, Eddie walked away from Chavo, leaving Norton and Buff alone to beat Chavo up. Eddie reasoned that he walked away to help toughen up Chavo. The next week on Nitro, Eddie and Chavo would face each other in a match. Having all those matches as children during show intermissions in Mexico, Chavo and Eddie had the chance to go out here and show the world what they could do together. Needless to say, the crowd went totally nuts during the match. After Eddie got the win and he hit Chavo with a frog splash after the match, Eddie's brother Hector made his way to the ring to stop the beatdown. Eddie pushed Hector to the mat, solidifying his new heel status. The following week, Eddie defeated Hector, but after the match, Dean Malenko attacked Eddie and gave him one of the most insane snap powerbombs you'll ever see. Eddie then went on to feud with Chris Jericho for the Cruiserweight title. He was unsuccessful in their Clash of the Champions 35 match, but he did win in the Fall Brawl rematch. Eddie would go on to defend his title against stars like Juventud Guerrera, Psychosis, Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho before making his way to Halloween Havoc 1997. His match here against Rey Mysterio is the stuff of legend, and many consider this as Eddie's greatest match in WCW. Guerrero fans shouldn't be the only people to check out this match though. Halloween Havoc 1997 is mandatory viewing for Rey Mysterio supporters too. Eddie dropped the belt here, but he was successful in recapturing the title on the November 10th episode of Nitro. Eddie went on to successfully defend the title against Mysterio at World War III, leading to Dean Malenko challenging Guerrero at Starrcade 97. Eddie vs Dean at Starrcade was the opening match and they practically stole the show. Not an easy task considering the much hyped Sting vs Hogan match was scheduled for the same event. In the end, Eddie would drop the title to Ultimo Dragon on the December 29th edition of Nitro. Early 1998 saw Eddie and Chavo reignite their feud. Eddie and Chavo had a match on Thunder, and if Chavo lost, he would have to become Eddie's slave. Eddie won the match, and this was around the time that Chavo would wear the infamous Eddie Guerrero is my favourite wrestler t-shirt. The relationship here between Chavo and Eddie was odd, but it provided some good TV. In mid-1998 though, the Guerrero-WCW relationship would get rocky. It's been said that Eddie Guerrero went to Eric Bischoff's office and asked for a raise and a more prominent position within the company. Eddie felt that the work that he had put into his WCW tenure so far justified an increase in pay or a slot higher in the card, and personally, I feel he wasn't wrong. Just looking at how many matches I've recommended throughout this video and having to stop myself from recommending more just highlights how good Guerrero was in WCW. Bischoff did not bend, and Eddie didn't get moved up the card, nor did he receive a pay increase, at least that we know of. On a live episode of Nitro, Eddie went to the ring and tore into Eric Bischoff. Eddie told Bischoff that he could shove the job up his ass before pouring coffee over himself, alleging here that Eric threw coffee over him during their office meeting. Eddie wrote in his book though that Eric did not throw coffee over him when he asked for a raise, but instead it was an accident where Bischoff knocked his coffee off a table, a pure mistake. Anyway, it was a worked shoot that grabbed Eddie a lot of attention. He took himself away for a few months, and when he came back to World Championship Wrestling, he formed the Latino World Order. The Latino World Order was formed due to the perception, and let's face it, the reality, that Eric Bischoff refused to put Latino wrestlers into the main event spots of World Championship Wrestling. Today, this kind of thing would never make the air. It would be viewed as a sensitive topic. The LWO pretty much featured every Mexican star in WCW except Rey Mysterio, a man that the faction feuded with due to his refusal to join. The storyline was cut short when Eddie Guerrero was involved in a serious car accident on New Year's Day 1999, and with that, the Latino World Order was no more. We will cover the Latino World Order's entire run in a future video. Nearly 6 months later, Eddie returned to WCW and became a founding member of the Filthy Animals faction, another stable that will be covered in an upcoming video. The original Filthy Animals group featured Guerrero, Conan, Billy Kidman and Rey Mysterio. Eddie wrote in his book that the Filthy Animals were conceived as WCW's answer to D-Generation X, which is funny seeing as DX was an answer to the New World Order. But anyway, the group flip-flopped from being babyfaces and heels. They started off by feuding with the Deadpool faction, picking up victories against the team at Road Wild and Fall Brawl in 1999. The Filthy Animals would then feud with The Revolution, leading to an entertaining match between Guerrero and Perry Saturn at Halloween Havoc and a mixed tag elimination match at WCW Mayhem, which The Revolution won. Eddie had his final WCW match on the 22nd of November 1999, defeating stablemate Billy Kidman. Vince Russo had came into WCW and quite a few wrestlers were already upset about their treatment within the company, along with their place on the card. After an incredibly good WCW run with some of the best matches in WCW's history, Eddie just could not break into the main event. Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit and Perry Saturn also struggled to achieve main event status in WCW, and even when WCW tried to appease Benoit with a World Heavyweight title reign, it just wasn't enough. The four men took themselves to the World Wrestling Federation to form the Radicals faction. The winners of the Lethal Lottery tag matches would then enter a Battle Royal, and the winner of the Battle Royal would receive a WCW World title shot. Fucking hell. The winners of the Lethal Lottery tag matches would then enter a Battle Royal, and the winner of the Battle Royal would fuck me.